March 11th, 1997, 11:43 p.m., Los Angeles. Harrison Ford's home phone rings. He's not supposed to be getting calls this late. His agent knows better. The studio knows better. But this isn't his agent. It's the United States Postal Service emergency night courier. A letter arrived, hand-delivered, marked urgent. The courier reads the envelope aloud. To Harrison Ford, from Jake Mercer, Sheridan, Wyoming. Ford goes quiet, tells the courier he'll be there in 20 minutes. Hangs up. Stares at the ceiling. In 48 hours, he's supposed to be in New York launching a $85 million film. 47 interviews scheduled, 6 cities, 9 days, contractual obligation. His name is on billboards in 200 countries. But none of that matters anymore, because Jake Mercer just sent a letter, and Jake Mercer never asks for anything. Here is the story. Ford drives to the courier depot himself, doesn't send an assistant. 12:19 a.m. The building is empty except for one employee who recognizes him immediately but doesn't say anything, just hands over the envelope. Small, white. The handwriting on the front is shaky, old. Ford opens it in his car. Inside, 2 lines written in pencil. The letters slope downward, like the hand that wrote them was running out of strength. You promised you'd be here. I don't have much time left. That's it. No explanation, no details, just those 2 sentences. Signed, Jake. Ford sits in the parking lot for 11 minutes, doesn't start the car, doesn't move. He knows exactly what this means. Jake Mercer is dying, and Jake Mercer doesn't write letters unless he means every word. 4 years earlier, August 1993, Ford was in Wyoming filming outdoor scenes for The Fugitive, location shooting near the Bighorn Mountains. The production needed a local pilot who knew the terrain, someone who could navigate sudden weather changes, low visibility, mountain turbulence. The studio hired Jake Mercer, 73 years old, former B-17 bomber pilot, World War II, flew 29 missions over Germany, shot down once, survived, came home, never talked about it. Spent the next 40 years running a small flight school in Sheridan, teaching ranchers and park rangers how to fly. Ford met him on the first day of aerial shooting. Jake walked onto the set wearing a leather jacket from 1944 and boots held together with duct tape. Didn't ask for an autograph. Didn't mention Star Wars, just looked at Ford and said, "You know how to fly?" Ford said yes. Jake said, "Hollywood flying or real flying?" Ford paused, said, "What's the difference?" Jake smiled. "Come with me, I'll show you." They spent 3 days flying together. Jake taught Ford things no Hollywood instructor ever mentioned: how to read wind patterns by watching how birds move, how to land on uneven ground when your instruments fail, how to stay calm when a storm hits and visibility drops to 0. On the 3rd day, they hit exactly that situation. Sudden snowstorm, whiteout conditions. Ford was piloting. Jake was co-pilot. The helicopter started losing altitude. Ford's hands tightened on the controls. Jake's voice stayed completely calm. "Don't fight it. Feel it." Ford listened, brought them down safely on a ridge nobody knew existed. When they landed, Ford's hands were shaking. Jake's weren't. Jake looked at him and said, "Now you know real flying." They didn't talk much after that. Filming ended. Ford went back to Los Angeles. Jake went back to Sheridan. But before Ford left, Jake gave him something. A small pilot's medallion. Bronze, scratched. The engraving read, "For when you need to remember that flying isn't about the destination. It's about who you're carrying with you." Ford never forgot that. Now, March 1997, sitting in a parking lot at 12:30 a.m., Ford reads the letter again. "You promised you'd be here." He did promise. On the last day of filming in 1993, Jake mentioned he was sick. "Nothing serious," he said, "just age catching up." Ford said, "If you ever need anything, call me." Jake laughed, said, "I won't." Ford insisted, "I mean it. Anything. I'll be there." Jake looked at him like he was measuring something, then said, "All right, if I ever really need you, I'll let you know." 4 years later. Jake is letting him know. Ford drives home, walks into his office. Sits at his desk, 1:02 a.m. On his calendar, March 13th, departure to New York. March 14th, press junket begins. 23 interviews that day alone. March 15th through March 22nd, 6 more cities. Contractual obligations, penalties for cancellation. The studio would lose millions. His reputation would take a hit. Every journalist in America would want to know why he bailed. Ford picks up the phone, calls his agent. It rings 4 times before someone answers, groggy, confused. Harrison? It's 1 a.m. What? Cancel everything. Silence on the other end. What do you mean, cancel everything? The press tour, all of it. Cancel it. You can't be serious. The studio will... I don't care what the studio will do. Cancel it, now. Harrison, this is $85 million film. You're contractually... I know what I'm contractually obligated to do. Cancel it anyway. At least give me a reason I can tell them. Medical emergency, family issue, something. Ford looks at the letter on his desk, 2 lines in shaky handwriting. No. No. Harrison, I need something. The press doesn't need to know anything. Cancel the tour. I'll deal with the consequences. He hangs up. For the next 6 hours, his phone rings constantly. His agent, the studio executives, the publicist, the producer. Everyone wants an explanation. Ford doesn't answer. At 6:47 a.m., he books a commercial flight to Wyoming. Not a private jet. Commercial. United Airlines, economy class. Departure 9:30 a.m. He packs 1 bag, jeans, t-shirts, a jacket, nothing expensive, nothing recognizable. He wears a baseball cap and sunglasses, walks through LAX like any other passenger. On the plane, he sits in seat 23C, middle seat, next to a woman in her 60s who's reading a magazine about gardening. She glances at him once, doesn't recognize him. The flight attendant does, but doesn't say anything. Ford appreciates that. The woman next to him eventually asks, "Heading to Wyoming for work?" Ford shakes his head. "Visiting a friend." She smiles. "That's nice. Not many people take time for that anymore." Ford looks out the window. No, they don't. The flight takes 2 hours and 41 minutes. Ford doesn't sleep, doesn't read, just thinks about Jake, about the promise he made 4 years ago, about what it costs to keep a promise when the world is watching you do something else. The plane lands in Billings, Montana. Ford rents a car, drives 2 hours south to Sheridan, Wyoming. Population, 15,000. He arrives at Sheridan Memorial Hospital at 4:14 p.m., walks to the front desk. The receptionist looks up. Her eyes widen slightly, but she doesn't say anything. Ford says, "I'm here to see Jake Mercer." She checks the computer, looks back at him. Her expression changes. "Are you family?" Ford pauses. "I'm the closest thing he has." She directs him to the 3rd floor. Palliative care wing, room 317. Ford takes the stairs. The hallway is quiet. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. He walks slowly, passes rooms with doors half open. Families inside, talking, crying, laughing, remembering. He reaches room 317. The door is closed. He knocks. Nobody answers. He opens it. The room is small. 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 window overlooking a parking lot. Jake is in the bed, eyes closed. Oxygen mask over his face. IV in his arm. Heart monitor beeping slowly. Steady. Ford stands in the doorway for a long time, then walks in. Sits in the chair next to the bed. A nurse comes in 3 minutes later. Young. Maybe 25. She sees Ford and stops, recognizes him, opens her mouth to say something, then doesn't. Just checks Jake's vitals. Ford asks, "How long has he been like this?" The nurse looks at Jake. 3 weeks. Terminal lung cancer. Diagnosed a month ago. He was coherent for the first week. Then he started fading. He woke up once 2 days ago. Asked for paper, wrote something, then went back under. We've been keeping him comfortable. Does he have family? The nurse shakes her head. Wife passed 12 years ago. No children. One brother died in 2001. We tried to find someone. There's nobody. There's me. The nurse looks at Ford for a long moment, then nods. I'll let the doctor know you're here. She leaves. Ford sits alone with Jake. The heart monitor beeps. 42 beats per minute. Slow. Tired. Ford reaches over. Takes Jake's hand. It's cold. Thin. The skin feels like paper. He holds it anyway. For 11 days, Ford doesn't leave that hospital. He sleeps in the chair next to Jake's bed. The nurses offer him a cot. He refuses. Says the chair is fine. Every morning at 6 a.m., he walks to the hospital cafeteria, gets coffee, black, 2 sugars, brings it back to the room, sits, watches Jake breathe. At 7:30 a.m., the doctor comes in, checks vitals, adjusts medication. Tells Ford that Jake's body is shutting down, kidneys failing, liver failing. It's only a matter of time. Ford asks, "Can he hear me?" The doctor says, "We don't know, but some patients report remembering voices. It doesn't hurt to talk." So Ford talks. He tells Jake about the press tour he cancelled, about the studio losing their minds, about the tabloids running stories. Harrison Ford vanishes? Health crisis? Ford laughs at that, says, "They think I'm dying. If they only knew." He tells Jake about Air Force One, about playing the president, about the scene where he fights terrorists at 30,000 feet, says none of it feels real, not like that storm we flew through. That was real. On the 3rd day, Ford starts reading to Jake, not scripts, not magazines. He finds a box in Jake's hospital room, personal effects, letters, photos, a journal. Ford opens the journal. It's from the war, 1943 to 1945. Jake's handwriting, young, steady. Ford reads entries aloud. Missions over Berlin, close calls, friends lost. A mission where Jake's plane took fire and he landed with 1 engine out and half the crew wounded. The entry ends with, "We made it. That's all that matters." Ford reads for hours. His voice gets hoarse. He doesn't stop. On the 5th day, a nurse comes in with news. A journalist called the hospital, asked if Harrison Ford was there. The hospital denied it, but word is spreading. Ford asks the nurse, "Can you keep them out?" She nods. "Hospital policy, we don't confirm patient visitors. But if they camp outside," Ford finishes the sentence, "I'll leave through the service entrance." He does exactly that for the next 6 days. Leaves at 2 a.m., returns at 4 a.m. Nobody sees him, nobody takes photos, nobody writes stories. It's the most invisible Harrison Ford has been since 1977. On the 9th day, something changes. Ford is sitting in the chair reading another journal entry when Jake's hand moves, just slightly. A twitch. Ford stops reading, looks at Jake's face, nothing. Then Jake's eyes open, slowly, barely. He looks at the ceiling, then turns his head, sees Ford, his eyes focus. For 14 seconds, Jake is fully present, awake, aware. Ford leans forward. "Hey, Jake!" Jake doesn't speak. Can't. The oxygen mask is on, but his eyes stay on Ford's face. Recognition, then something else. Relief. His hand moves again, reaches for Ford. Ford takes it, holds it tight. Jake squeezes once. Weak, but deliberate. Ford understands. He squeezes back. "I'm here. I kept the promise." Jake's eyes close, but the corner of his mouth moves. Not quite a smile, but close. Then he's gone again, back under. Ford sits back in the chair. His own eyes are wet. He doesn't wipe them, just keeps holding Jake's hand. 2 days later, March 22nd, 1997, 4:22 a.m. The heart monitor changes rhythm, slower, irregular. Ford is awake. He's been awake for hours, watching, waiting. The nurse comes in, checks the monitor, looks at Ford. "It's time." Ford nods. She leaves to give them privacy. Ford moves his chair closer, takes both of Jake's hands, leans in. "Jake, it's okay. You can go. You did good. You flew every mission. You made it home. And you taught a kid from Hollywood what it means to really fly. That matters. You matter. The heart monitor beeps slower, slower. Then one long tone. Silence. The nurse comes back in, checks for a pulse, shakes her head, looks at Ford. I'm sorry. Ford doesn't respond. Just sits there, still holding Jake's hands. The nurse quietly leaves. Ford stays for another hour. Doesn't move, doesn't speak. Just sits with the man who taught him that flying isn't about the destination, it's about who you're carrying with you. March 23rd, 1997. Ford checks out of the small motel where he'd been sleeping 2 hours a night. Drives back to Billings, takes a commercial flight to Los Angeles, lands at 11:47 p.m. There are photographers at LAX. They swarm him. Questions shouted, "Where were you? Why did you cancel? Are you sick? Is it true you had a breakdown?" Ford walks past all of them, doesn't answer, doesn't stop, gets in his car, drives home. The next morning, his agent calls. The studio wants to sue for breach of contract. Ford says, let them. They don't sue. Instead, they issue a statement. Due to unforeseen personal circumstances, Mr. Ford was unable to attend the scheduled press events. We appreciate everyone's understanding. The press tour happened without him. The director did interviews alone. Co-stars filled gaps. Air Force One premiered on July 25, 1997. It made $315 million worldwide. Fifth highest grossing film of the year. Critics loved it. Audiences loved it. Nobody cared that Ford missed the press tour, except the journalists. They wanted to know why. For months they asked. Ford never answered. In November 1997, a journalist finally confronted him directly. Late-night interview, live TV. The host asked, "You disappeared for 11 days in March. Cost the studio millions. Do you regret it?" Ford looked directly into the camera, paused, then said, "No. And if you'd done what I did, you wouldn't regret it either." The host pressed, "What did you do?" Ford smiled slightly. Kept a promise. He never elaborated, never explained, never told the story. 3 weeks after Jake died, Ford returned to Sheridan. No cameras, no press. He attended Jake Mercer's funeral. Military honors. American flag draped over the casket. 21 guns salute. 17 people attended. Ford was one of them. He sat in the back row, wore sunglasses. Nobody recognized him. After the service, the funeral director approached him, said they were having trouble covering costs. Jake had no estate, no insurance. Ford pulled out his checkbook, wrote a check for the full amount, then added another zero. Said, "For the cemetery maintenance. Make sure his grave is taken care of." The funeral director looked at the check, looked at Ford, started to say thank you. Ford was already walking away. Before he left Sheridan, Ford went to Jake's grave. Alone. Evening. The cemetery was empty. He knelt down, placed something on the headstone. The bronze pilot's medallion Jake had given him in 1993, the one with the engraving, "Flying isn't about the destination, it's about who you're carrying with you." Ford stood there for 6 minutes, then left, never came back. Some moments aren't for cameras. Years pass. The story stays buried. Journalists move on. The public forgets Ford ever missed a press tour. In 2003, 6 years after Jake's death, something small happens. A nurse who worked at Sheridan Memorial Hospital posts anonymously on a veterans forum. She doesn't use names, just writes, "I once watched a famous actor spend 11 days at a dying veteran's bedside. Nobody else came. No family, no friends, just this one guy who didn't leave. I've worked in hospitals for 20 years, never saw anything like it." The post gets 43 comments, mostly from other veterans saying they wish they had someone like that. Nobody identifies Ford. The post disappears into the archive, forgotten. A small documentary about forgotten World War II veterans is filmed. Jake Mercer's name appears briefly. A 2-minute segment. They mention he was a pilot, flew 29 missions, survived, came home, ran a flight school, died in 1997. They don't mention Ford, but the documentary's producer contacts Ford's publicist anyway, asks for an interview, wants to talk about Jake. Ford declines, but he sends a letter, 3 sentences. Jake Mercer wasn't forgotten. I remember. That's enough. The producer includes the letter in the documentary's credits. Nobody notices. Sheridan Memorial Hospital announces a renovation. New palliative care wing. State-of-the-art equipment. Private rooms for families to stay overnight with dying loved ones. Total cost, $4.2 million. A press release lists the donors. Most are local families. One donation stands out, $2 million, is anonymous. The hospital administrator is asked about it in an interview, says, "We can't reveal the donor's identity, but I will say this, it came from someone who understood what it means to sit with someone at the end, someone who knows that nobody should die alone." The nurses who worked there in 1997 recognize the fake name used on the donation, the same pseudonym Ford used when he checked in to visit Jake. They don't tell anyone. Some secrets are worth keeping. 27 years after Jake Mercer's death, a journalist doing research on Harrison Ford's career stumbles across hospital records, public records, lists of visitors. March 11th through March 22nd, 1997. One name appears every single day, a pseudonym. The journalist cross-references, confirms, writes an article, "The Real Reason Harrison Ford cancelled his 1997 press tour," posts it online. It gets 847 views. No major outlet picks it up. Ford never comments, because some stories don't need millions of views. Some stories just need one person who kept a promise nobody was watching them keep. When journalists ask Ford today about career moments he'll never forget, he mentions Blade Runner, Star Wars, Indiana Jones. He never mentions March 1997. Never mentions Jake Mercer. Never mentions 11 days in a hospital room in Wyoming. Because the moments that matter most are rarely the ones that fit in a 3-minute interview. They're the 264 hours nobody filmed. The days no studio sponsored. The moment you choose the person over the product, even when it costs everything. Have you ever kept a promise that nobody knew about? One that didn't benefit you, didn't earn you anything, didn't make you look good, but you kept it anyway because someone was counting on you. Think about that, and maybe share that story in the comments, because the world needs more of those stories. The ones that don't make headlines, the ones that just make us human. Ford is 82 years old now. Still acts, still flies, still doesn't talk about Jake. But every year on March 22nd he takes a day off, doesn't schedule interviews, doesn't take meetings, just stays home, quiet, alone, remembering. Some moments aren't for cameras. In Sheridan, Wyoming, there's a plaque at the local airport. Small, bronze, easy to miss. It lists volunteer rescue pilots who served the community over the decades. 47 names. Jake Mercer's name is there. Right below it, "In memory of those who fly not for glory, but because someone needs them." Nobody knows Ford paid for that plaque. The airport director does, but he was asked not to say anything. Some gifts aren't meant to be announced, and that's the difference. Hollywood measures success in box office numbers, in headlines, in how many people saw you be the hero. But Jake Mercer taught Ford a different metric. Success is measured in the promises you keep when nobody's counting. In the moments you show up when it would be easier to stay home. In choosing presence over prestige when everything in your career says to do the opposite. Air Force One made Harrison Ford look like a president who would save the world. But in March 1997, he chose to save one man's world, and that world never became a trailer, never got promoted on talk shows, never won awards. It was just a man sitting next to another man, keeping the only thing that matters when everything comes down to essentials, being there. Some moments aren't for cameras, they're for the people who are counting on you when the cameras are gone. When the applause stops, when the lights go out, that's when you find out what kind of person you really are. Harrison Ford found out in room 317 of a hospital in Wyoming. A room most people will never see, a story most people will never know, but Jake Mercer knew. And for 11 days in March 1997, that was the only audience that mattered. And unfortunately, they don't make men like Harrison Ford anymore.